Welcome to the flight levels. You often hear pilots and controllers talking to each other all day long over VHF. But once in a while, a controller may transmit to the pilot, "Last calling center, say again, I was on the landline." What exactly does that mean? Well, in addition to talking to pilots, controllers are constantly talking to other controllers. They need to coordinate all sorts of critical information, and they do it through a sophisticated internal phone network called the Landline. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on this secret world. We're covering landline communications, how controllers talk to each other, and most importantly, what they talk about. Let's get to it. If you're enjoying this content, hit that like and subscribe button. It seriously helps me make more videos like this. Let's start with the simplest kind of coordination. Controllers talking to each other within the same facility, maybe even just a few feet apart. This coordination is typically a simple verbal exchange or physical point out, where one controller physically points to an aircraft's data block on a screen and gets a nod from the neighbor. But what if the person you need to talk to is several sectors away or even in a different area? Controllers use a dedicated system, often with a simple 3-digit dial pad code, to call any other position in the building. It's an incredibly efficient system. The receiving controller hears a tone right in their headset. Their microphone is automatically hot, meaning they don't have to push any buttons to answer. They simply state their position like, "Sector 36. The calling controller identifies themselves, Sector 12, and makes their request. Once the coordination is complete, the calling controller ends the call. The receiving controller never has to push a single button. Controllers also have the ability to adapt their consoles to their needs, allowing them to press a single pre-programmed button to call a frequently needed position. One last cool feature is, if a position is combined with another, for example, say Sector 36 is combined into Sector 12, the system uses call forwarding. When Sector 36 is closed, any calls automatically ring at Sector 12, seamlessly. Now, the real fun begins when controllers need to talk to positions outside their own facility, coordinating between two different centers or a center and a TRACON. This is where you use what are brilliantly called shout lines. These lines are typically dedicated to a specific coordination point and are often shared by several different sectors at your facility and the bordering one. Here's how a coordinating call using a shout line works. If I'm Denver Center and I need to talk to Los Angeles Center, I press my shout line button and hold my push to talk switch. I would say Los Angeles 7, which is who I'm calling, Denver 68, which is who I am, Appreqs, which is short for approval request. The name shout line is earned because all the sectors at Los Angeles Center that share this line hear my transmission over a speaker. I'm literally shouting across the boundary. When the controller at Los Angeles 7 is ready to talk, they press their button on the line and reply, "Los Angeles 7. The moment both controllers have selected the line on their consoles, the call is now exclusive and routed directly into both of our headsets. This is your cue to make your full request, which could be Appreqs November 123, block altitude 17,000 to flight level 190. Since shout lines are shared, they can get congested. If you press the line and hear another conversation in progress, you just close your end and try again in a moment. But if you have an urgent, time-critical need for coordination, you can interrupt any conversation with the phrase, "break for control." That's the universal cue for everyone else to end their conversation immediately so you can make your call. Shout lines are the backbone of inter-facility coordination used between center to center, center to TRACON, and center to tower. We've mentioned the Appreqs. This is required for anything that goes against a pre-established plan or written letter of agreement. For example, when I worked the arrival sector into Denver, afternoon thunderstorms were incredibly common. Our letter of agreement with the TRACON stated aircraft would be cleared on specific arrival routes or stars. But if a thunderstorm was sitting right in the middle of that route, pilots would be deviating off of the star. I would call the TRACON controller an Appreq a different route, say slightly north of the usual path to a different fix. Since this routing was not in accordance with the letter of agreement, I had to get the verbal approval first. Other things that require Appreqs are block altitudes and inappropriate altitude for direction of flight, or IOFF. Normally, when an aircraft moves from one sector to another, the controller performs a handoff and the pilot is told to switch to the next controller's frequency. But what if a plane is just going to clip a tiny sliver of a sector? Instead of making the pilot switch frequencies for a quick 2-minute pass, the controller can make a point out to the adjacent sector. It's essentially a heads up. Hey, just want to give you a heads up, this plane's flying past you and I suspect you don't need to talk to them. What do you think? The receiving controller has a few possible responses. The first is point out approved, which means everything's good, no restrictions. They could also say point out approved, reference this other traffic. The aircraft is now pointed out, but you are responsible for keeping it separated from some other specified traffic. Or lastly, they could reply with radar contact. This means they need to talk to the plane because they have a traffic conflict they need to resolve. Another reason for landline calls are manual handoffs. Normally, handoffs are initiated and accepted through automation on the screen. But sometimes the receiving controller might be busy, distracted, or just not accepting the handoff as the aircraft is nearing the boundary. A sending controller cannot allow any aircraft to enter another sector without coordination. So they call the controller and force the issue. For example, handoff, Southwest 123, 10 miles west of the XYZ VOR. This gets the receiving controller's immediate attention, and they typically reply in one of 3 ways. They could reply radar contact, which means they accept the handoff, no restrictions. They could also reply a control instruction such as Southwest 123, descend and maintain flight level 200 for traffic, radar contact. This is an immediate traffic instruction, passed controller to controller, which the sending controller then gives to the pilot. This saves precious time by not waiting for the pilot to switch frequencies. Lastly, the receiving controller could reply unable. This is rare, but if they have a traffic saturation or an equipment outage, they may be unable to accept the handoff. So the next time you hear a controller say, I was on the landline, you know the pilot is just one part of the conversation. Airspace is a complex 3-dimensional puzzle, and keeping those pieces moving safely requires constant, direct, and incredibly precise communication between the people on the ground. The landline system, from 3-digit dials to urgent shout lines, is the invisible highway that keeps air traffic moving safely every single day. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out flight-levels.com. Don't forget to subscribe for more inside looks into air traffic control. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out my analysis of a fatal crash just outside Telluride. You're gonna love it.